Let's talk about ownership for a second. Ownership is nice. Owning things is nice. Me being able to own this flashlight is a really nice thing. Works really well. It's nice and bright. Runs on AA batteries. I bought it with my own money. I made that money interacting with the outside world and other people in a voluntary manner, exchanging my labor for value, and I was able to go to the store and purchase something like this flashlight. Now, by definition of the word ownership, I get to do whatever I want with this flashlight. I can use it. I can sell it if I'd like to sell it. And nobody has the right to tell me what I may or may not do with this flashlight. Of course, barring the odd transgression that one could commit with something like this. Probably not a very good weapon, but barring the initiation of violence against another person, I have the right to do whatever it is I so choose with this flashlight. If I were to be told, or if I were to be required to pay a weekly or monthly or yearly fee, for example, like a subscription fee, in order to be able to use, in order to be able to own, or in order to be able to have this in my possession and use it, by definition, I no longer would be the owner of this flashlight. I would be a lessee of the flashlight. Similarly, if I owned a car, and in order to use the car, I had to pay a monthly subscription fee in order to be able to use my car. And of course, this is with the exception of the odd financing of a car, buying it with a loan. But if I were to purchase something outside of the realm of loaning money in order to be able to purchase it, and then I were to have to pay a fee in order to use that car, I, by definition, would no longer be the owner of that car, by virtue of having to pay for the privilege of being able to use that car. It's different than a loan, because a loan is you going to the bank and asking for money, and then the bank lending you money, which is a contractual relationship that you then have to fulfill your part of. But I'm talking about when you think you own something, but in reality, if you have to pay a subscription fee in order to use it, do you really actually own that thing? So now I get to the actual point of the video where I will talk about home ownership. I don't think that anybody in this country truly owns their own property or their own home, the property that their home sits on. Because in this country we have this thing called property tax. which is a fee. It's a government fee that the government forces people to pay on a yearly basis in order to be able to keep their property, for the privilege of being able to keep what they think is their own property. But in reality, I don't think anybody really owns their own property. I don't really think anybody owns their own house, because if you're forced to pay a subscription fee for a house that you've already paid for, again, back to the whole idea of loans. Let's say, for example, you've already paid for your house, you've paid off your mortgage, and you are in good standing. You don't owe anybody any money, and everybody in society would say that you are the rightful owner of your house. But I'm here to tell you that indeed you are not. Because if you are forced to pay a subscription fee in order to be able to live in your house and in order to be able to keep your house, then by definition you are not the owner of your house. Because that's not how ownership works. If you own something, that you don't need to pay any sort of subscription fee in order to be able to retain that thing. Once you're forced to pay for that, then you are nothing more than a lessee. And the government is your landlord. And that is indeed my estimation of the situation, in that we are all simply just lessees from whatever the state is so gracious as to let us keep, including our house, including our own money, including our own property. We can also add inheritance tax to that. So the inheritance that we so deservedly should get from our family members that have passed on. We also don't technically own that, because this organization that we call the government, that we hallucinate legitimacy to and think that it has the right to dictate how much of what should be in a truly just and free society should be our rightful property, isn't our rightful property under the current situation, under the current society that we live in. And that's what's truly disheartening just about the whole world, and of course living in this country as well, is that there are so many things that have been turned up on their head under the guise of maintaining a civil and just society that ostensibly wouldn't exist in the absence of this horrific totalitarian ruling class that we live under. And people don't really recognize it. Anytime you mention the idea that maybe there shouldn't be income tax, maybe there shouldn't be property tax, maybe there shouldn't be inheritance, maybe taxation in and of itself is an unnecessary evil. Maybe taxation in and of itself is something that society, that civilization can exist in the absence of. And all you typically get is the standard rebuttal, if you can even call it that, where the person that you're talking to immediately reverts to basic logical fallacies and logical panic, and they say, well, who would build the roads, and who would protect society, and who would, and they talk about all of the positive things, or the ostensibly positive things that government ostensibly provides, and they never ever revert to the negative things that governments have done and continue to do to this day. Never once is it ever, well, there are these absolutely horrific negative things that government does, that we should be allowed to refrain from funding, it's always none of these great things like roads would exist in the absence of government, even though government doesn't build anything. Government doesn't produce things. They rob everybody and take that money and then pay companies to do those things. So in a free society, all that would happen is that you would be getting rid of the middleman in this situation, and then you would be paying directly to the people that would be buying or would be creating the goods and services that we're in need of. But people are so inculcated in this normalcy bias that society, the way that it is, needs to continue the way that it is, and that any sort of radical change, any sort of absence of this behemoth that we live under would result in absolute chaos, even though historically it's governments that have resulted in the most amount of human suffering and mass murder and all of those wonderful types of things. And people just cling on to it. Even at times, if you were to mention property taxes theft, even then, people still revert to this idea that without being robbed every single year, without being held under duress, under this overwhelming threat of violence and fear that if they screw up just a little bit on their commie collection form, that they might go to jail, and they will turn around and tell you that that's normal. It's not normal. Society should not exist. Humanity shouldn't exist under duress. Nobody should exist under duress. Nobody should fear that if they refrain from paying a stupid fucking subscription fee for their house, for their rightfully owned house, that men will with guns will come and kick their door down and throw them in a cage for not doing it. Nobody should live like that. Nobody should live in that kind of fear. If you disagree from a moral standpoint with the way that your money is being used, you should not have to fund whatever it is that you've been funding with your own money. You should be able to refrain from funding that and not be punished for it by society. Because anything less than that is slavery. And if you were to tell somebody what we live under right now is slavery, you and I are slaves, they'll laugh at you and they'll mock you and they'll say that you're a conspiracy wacko theorist, somebody who should go live in the woods, somebody who should voluntarily just separate themselves from humanity. And there's this disconnect, this idea, this sick idea in everybody's head that just because you don't want to be robbed of your own money means that it's the moral imperative is on you to separate yourself from society and not for society itself and government, it's not really society, it's just government, to leave you alone because you haven't transgressed against anybody. This is how twisted and sick society and humanity has been for time immemorial. And this is how it's going to continue to be as long as people cling on to their false beliefs in the deity, the mythology of government. But it's people like myself that still hope that maybe there will come a day where people shed those beliefs, or there continues to be every single day. There's more and more people that do, but the question is there going to be enough time before this whole thing just comes to a head? I hope that people do come to the correct conclusions, namely, and amongst others, the conclusion that you and I shouldn't have to pay a subscription fee in order to be able to retain the ownership of our own property and our own home.